to a lot of those same characters.
Oh yeah. Well, which brings me to the question, because you mentioned this incident where he showed up with Abby Hoffman and Timothy Leary there, and he throws his gun down, and people right away assumed he was an agent. Now, that there's how much of that is covered? Not just him being an agent, but that all the paranoia that went on with this crew. You can't blame them. All the marijuana, the smoke, that makes you paranoid, and all the surveillance and infiltration that did really go on. How much of the infiltration, the COINTELPRO, the agents do you cover in your book?
Yeah, it's kind of a always present thing. It's not just, COINTELPRO and the CIA program Chaos. It's also at the time, there were constantly stories coming out that say the U.S. Army was surveilling citizens. There was the Church Commission. So there were, as the 70s progressed, not only were people getting paranoid because of maybe their illegal activities or maybe whatever they were smoking, but also they were consistently being reminded that that there were in fact government agents who were trying to go after them. And so I think that's a huge part of the book is really what that especially during the Nixon years, what that kind of government surveillance and repression did to the psyches of all of these people. I think it's been said before, but really, COINTELPRO was maybe not even most effective as a way to, throw people in jail or get them in front of grand juries. It really just made everyone so freaked out that they suspected everyone else of being an agent or compromised in some way. So I wanted to talk about, that that environment that was so pervasive throughout those years.
Yeah. So so people who were making the allegation that Forçade might have been an agent, because when you look back, and you see Forçade driving around in stolen cars all the time, carrying weapons, and tons of marijuana stashed all over Manhattan, and everybody getting away with all this. What do you make of all that?
Yeah, it's very easy to sort of present this story of a guy who's clearly working for the government. I mean, he comes on the scene with this assumed name. His real name was Gary Goodson.
Right.
He was from Phoenix, Arizona. But he comes on the scene. No one's ever heard of this guy. He has no background in the movement, as they call it. And he's suddenly brushing shoulders with the most influential people of the time, whether it's like John Sinclair of the White Panthers or Abby Hoffman and Jerry Rubin. So he's got this access to all these people. Then he starts microfilming with Bell and Howell all the different underground newspapers. There are several government agencies which then have subscriptions to the underground newspapers, and they've got their hands on all that. So the people who worked with Forçade at the Underground Press Syndicate even said, well, I couldn't understand, if he wasn't, an agent, why would he be doing this? Even as they were working for him. So, then as his drug business kind of increases, then a lot of people question, well, why didn't he get arrested?
Yeah.
And in fact, I could not get any DEA or BNDD, the predecessor agency. I could not get any files through FOIA on Tom Forçade. There were also allegations that he had plotted to assassinate Nixon in 1972, and so this is talked about in his FBI files, and the Secret Service is, part of this conversation. But I could not get any Secret Service files either. On top of that, there are always the people who say, well, High Times, that's a perfect way to get mailing lists of all the people buying drugs or drug paraphernalia. How suspicious, could it be? So these are some of the reasons. And I guess there's also a very key thing. He also picked fights with all the other people on the left. That said, I did not find anything to prove that he was an agent. I'm not sure I believe he was. I think one really plausible theory might be that he was trying to play both sides of the fence. Maybe he thought he could, beat government agencies at their own game. But there are tons of circumstantial things that definitely make you stand back and say, what's going on? The day that he first contacted the already existing Underground Press Syndicate, he didn't found the Underground Press Syndicate. He just sort of took it over. The day that he contacted UPS was August 15th, 1967, which happens to be the same day that the CIA's Operation Chaos program began.
Really?
So I would come across things like that, and I would start wondering, is my phone tapped? Like, what? How much should I trust the people I'm talking to? You start to see how easily you can get paranoid around this stuff.
Yeah, once you start questioning, is my phone tapped? It probably is. Probably already is. That's how to stay safe. How many times was this guy arrested? How many arrests did Tom Forçade have in his lifetime?
That I know of, I would say maybe 4.
Oh, really? Okay. Okay.
But these were situations. One of them was possession of LSD in 1969 in Phoenix. That was thrown out. Another was later in 1969 for desecration of an American flag. He wore a flag as a hat band at a press convention. He was bailed out the same day. Those charges were dropped. The biggest one is a 1972 firebombing charge. That was on the last day of the Republican National Convention in 1972. His truck was pulled over. He was arrested for a traffic charge. And then months later, the candles that had been in his vehicle were cited as evidence that he had plotted to blow something up. And that actually got to trial, but was thrown out pretty quickly. I think it was after that arrest that Forçade really stopped trying to be a public figure. I think that shook him up a little bit. At the end of 1972, he went kind of quiet for about a year and a half, and then High Times emerged in 1974.
Yeah, very interesting. By the way, do we know who his attorney was for that case? It was the firebombing?
I cannot remember at the moment, although it is in the book. I think Roger Lowenstein may have been the attorney.
Because it's interesting, because Jerry Lefcourt was so involved with so many of the Yippie, he was Abby Hoffman's attorney for a long time, but with so many Yippie-type cases. And then later on, working for Jeffrey Epstein, he was part of the Jeffrey Epstein defense in Palm Beach down there. It's just, how does that happen, Yeah, Jerry Lefcourt was representing Abby Hoffman when Forçade and Abby Hoffman were fighting about, who owed who what for Steal This Book. And so Jerry Lefcourt remembered Forçade as a very weird, antagonistic individual, not surprisingly. Oh, so you did interview Lefcourt about the book?
I talked to him, yeah.
Okay, great. I got to get this book, man. I got to get this book. People can check it out. There's a chapter in Rolling Stone. Check that out. But if you want to meet Sean Howe in person, check him out. October 2nd, he's going to be in Los Angeles at the Stories Book and Cafe. And then on October 6th, he's going to be in Phoenix. But then again, October 10th, he's going to be, what is that, upstate New York? Andy's, New York?
Andy's, New York is far upstate in the Catskills, yeah. And
once again, you could find him on Twitter at Sean Howe, Howe, SeanHowe.com. And the book is called Agents of Chaos. Sorry?
Oh, I was just jumping in to say Agents of Chaos.
Yeah, Agents of Chaos, Thomas King Forçade, High Times, and the Paranoid End of the 70s. Why don't you get into that whole story about steal this book? Because the joke is that Abby stole the book. Okay, so why don't you get into the whole story? I have an autographed copy, too, of Abby Hoffman signing an autographed copy of Steal This Book. If anybody wants to make me an offer, I'm open. Okay, but tell us the story about that, about the controversy of Steal This Book.
Yeah, so it's a pretty complicated story, but I'll try to give the overview, which is Abby Hoffman had kind of compiled this book of if you've read Steal This Book, you know
it's a great book,
but it's kind of a resource for people to get free food, get free everything, how to beat the fuzz, I think there's some phone freaking stuff in there, how to get free phone calls. So it's like a source book for how to break the law. It's like a mostly nonviolent anarchist cookbook, I guess. So Forçade was brought on to work as an editor on it, to be the editor of it, and to help use his Underground Press distribution network to get the book in the hands of people. At one point, Abby Hoffman did not want to go through the major publishers. He wanted to try to just go through an alternative distribution system. So Forçade did some editing on the book. He also contributed. He wrote some of the content, and then they had a fallout over money, and Forçade threatened a lawsuit. The people around them kind of huddled and said, why don't we keep this out of the courts and we'll do kind of a people's tribunal. We'll get some people we trust and we'll have a hearing in the basement of this church and we will make a judgment as to who owes who what. So this got play in like the New York Times and the New York Post and the Daily News and all the national news magazines. It was a big deal that like Abby Hoffman was, being sued by another counterculture figure for ripping him off. But the long-lasting effect of this trial, which, kind of the outcome was sort of muddled, and I think, one of them paid some money and one of them paid. I think the Abbey ended up giving Forçade like free books that he could then sell. It was kind of a draw, but the real outcome of this was that Forçade really began to hate Abby Hoffman, and this is sort of like the seed of the forming the Zippies, and so. The Yippies had famously, said, don't trust anyone over 30, and the Zippies were saying, don't trust the Yippies. So this was kind of all happening, with the backdrop of the McGovern-Nixon campaign. And the Zippies were saying, these guys have endorsed McGovern, they're sellouts, and the Zippies began doing all of these crazy demonstrations and stunts when they were in Miami. They had for instance, a Wheelchairs for Wallace event where they were, pushing a dummy of George Wallace on a wheelchair and then dumping him into the ocean. They stole a portrait of Lyndon Johnson from the convention center and, kind of vandalized that and carried it around. They were really going after as much media attention as they could get and really trying to infuriate as many people as they could.
What about, because the Zippies were like more of aggressive, I guess you might call it, than the old-timer Yippies. Okay, much more street fighters than the Yippies were. Were portrayed as peaceniks, the Yippies, but than the Zippies later on, a little more active. But the thing is that there was just so much smuggling and dealing and distribution going around this whole crowd. So I can kind of see how someone like Forçade could come in with his background and all that kind of power and money and influence